Vasel, and we are looking at the best top 10 games from each letter of the alphabet, the AlphaBest series, and we are at the letter W today. And once again, the letter W is just full of amazing games. Really enjoy many of these games. Many of them are my top 100 games of all time. W is just a very strong letter, maybe because it starts with the word war. And there are several games here that have war as a beginning for them. So let's jump into that. Number 10 is Warlock. This is a game many people have not heard of. It's from Quinted Games. It's a game I enjoy because the cards in the game can be used for multiple things. They can be used kind of as resources. They can be used to be put down kind of in a grid to score points at the end of the game. They can be used as workers in your dungeon. The artwork is by I mean pretty awful actually. And the theme is, I don't really care about the fantasy theme that much at all. But the gameplay itself is really solid, and I really found some interesting ways to use cards. I liked how they were, you just play differently as time goes by. Solid game, Warlock. Number 9 is Warhammer, Disc Wars. Now, I like Warhammer universe to some degree, Warhammer 40k too, but Warhammer Disc Wars is a fascinating game in which you're using discs on the board. You're not flipping them or throwing them. Essentially, though, you will flip them, I guess, by moving them. They kind of flip from end to end, which gives them a very unique movement capabilities, able to move around and maneuver. And there's several factions for this game. Unfortunately, they didn't make expansions for all the factions, which I had hoped. I don't think the game took off as well as it did. This is kind of the remake of the original Disc Wars, the Warhammer version. But there's enough of it out there for you still to have a lot of fun with it. And the main factions, they gave you enough expansions for them. Certainly a unique feeling to the game, Warhammer Disc Wars. Number 8 is a very unique game that I have in my collection just because it's so unique and interesting, and that is Witness. In Witness, it's a co-op game where you are essentially playing Whisper Down the Alley mixed with deduction. Each player, and you have to have exactly 4 players for this game, has a book. And you play one case in that book, and I think there's like 50 cases, and you have a page of clues, and you look at those clues, and then you will whisper them to the person next to you. Then that person will whisper them to the person next to them, and that person will whisper them to the person next to them. And you're hearing all these clues, and then they'll open up a case book, and they'll ask everyone questions, and you guys have to individually get these questions correctly, and then you find that however many questions you get right as a group, that's your total score. It ranges from hard to super hard, but it's entertaining, it's unique and different. I really think it's a cool game. Number 7 is War of the Ring. War of the Ring is a big, grandiose game. I always say that it's Lord of the Rings in a box, and I'm not wrong. One player is playing the Fellowship of the Ring, marching forward to throw the ring into Mount Doom. And in the movies, in the books, eventually it just comes down to Frodo and Sam. In this game, you can have more people go with you. However, just like in the books, people split off from the party and went and helped lead armies, and you can do that here too, and it's probably a good idea, and you have to decide when to pull people off and send them out, because the bad player, the Nazgul, the Shadow, can destroy the good guys in military victory. So there's always this threat of military victory before the good player can throw that ring into the mountain. Lots of pieces all over the board. It is a fairly complex game. It is a long game, but it is a solid, strong thematic game. An experience that if you haven't played it, you should try it at least once. War of the Ring. Number 6 is Warlord, this collectible card game, I believe originally from AEG. Had not too long of a shelf life, but there is a ton of it out there, and I think it works really well if you buy just a couple starter decks and play them against each other. Warlord is one of the precursors to each person having one person who's their warlord or mage or summoner or whatever fighting, and you have to kill your opponents. There's a lot of games like that out there now, and having minions in front of you, but had a very neat deck building aspect to it in that you could basically have these big characters. They just had to have smaller ones in front of them, so you could play with a bunch of weenies or some heavier characters, and it used a D20 for combat, which some people hate. But I really enjoy it. I think it's one of the more fun CCGs. Yeah, you can go up against someone with a better deck than you maybe, but you'll still have a lot of fun as the different characters fight each other in it. And it's pretty cheap to find these days. It's a dead CCG, so easy to find decks and play it. Number 5 just came out last year, and that's Warhammer Quest Adventure. I honestly did not expect to enjoy this game as much as I did. I looked at it, a card game for Warhammer Quest, all right, whatever. But this card game does a really unique job at giving each player in this cooperative game. Different cards, they're essentially the same actions, but your action will have a little bit different of an effect than other people's actions. And just trying to figure out the best time to play each card, working together as a group as you go through. There's different missions in the game, and each one has a somewhat of a different feel. You go through the dungeon and you're fighting monsters and looking for treasure. There's a lot going on in this game, and there's just really a ton of game packed in this small box. Highly recommend it. Warhammer Quest Adventure. Number 4 is a small game from Yellow that I love, and that's Welcome to the Dungeon. Just a very simple game that they brought from Japan, in which players have one hero who's about to go in a dungeon, and players are making the dungeon harder and making the hero worse until one player says, all right, I can do this. I'll take the hero through the dungeon, and then they see if they succeed or not. And it's, you're sitting there going, do I add another card to the dungeon? And you're trying to basically stay in the auction. You are auctioning to see who takes the hero through, and you do so by taking away a piece of their equipment or by making the dungeon harder. And if you think, I can't do it, you drop out, and eventually one person has to go through. It's simple, it's silly, but it's what I look for in a game above all, and that is fun. Number 3 is close to being a computer game, but a board game also, and that's World of Yoho. Now, World of Yoho is a game in which your phone becomes a ship, and you put it on the board, and you're moving them around, and you're shooting at each other and buying goods and selling goods at other spots. Very solid game play. It's a little lengthy with 4 players, although that's also probably the best number to play with it, because players will be constantly picking up their phone and working on what they're selling and doing. But when you get into those combats and you see the shots firing off one phone onto the other phone, and you see your hard work coming into play, or when you move into a spot and there's a Kraken suddenly that you didn't know was there, it does a lot of good having hidden information on the phone. I don't know if this game will age well, but for right now, it's one that I really enjoy playing. Number 2 is a party game from North Star, and that is Wits and Wagers. When I first played Wits and Wagers, I enjoyed the idea. A trivia game where you don't have to know the right answer. You have to guess which player knows the right answer, or at least comes closest to the answer without going over. So you write a numerical answer down and then bid on whoever's answer you think is the right one. They came out with Wits and Wagers Party, Wits and Wagers Family, but the original Wits and Wagers is the best. But even so, it might not have made my top 10, except that you can change this game into a huge event, turn it into a game show event, which is something we do at many of the different Dice Tower events, and we run it, and when you do that, it elevates this game to an 11. Wits and Wagers Game Show is one of the best party games that you can play. It is fun, it gets people laughing. I've never run or participated in a bad one of this game, Wits and Wagers. And number 1 for me is a game that just adds everything in Euro games and throws in a unique thing, and that's Wallenstein. The unique thing is the cube tower. A tower where you throw your armies, your cubes into it, and some of them get caught in the tower, other ones fall out, and whoever has more armies fall out wins. Yes, this could be simulated with dice, but the cube tower is neat. And that would be a gimmick that would already make me like the game, and in fact, it's used in a couple other games. But those games aren't in my top 10s at all. Wallenstein also has a very unique mechanism where you are taking cards for the different provinces and you're deciding which ones to tax and which ones to march in and which ones you're going to do this maneuver and that maneuver in. And there's a solid style Euro game mixed with a war game. It's one of the best hybrid games in existence. There's a sequel to Wallenstein that I like a little bit less because I don't like the map as much, and that's Shogun, which is Japan, but they're essentially the same game. I think that they're both excellent games. Wallenstein gets the pick from me just because I like the map of Germany better. It is fascinating, it is fun, and really there's no other game I know that manages to do as many things as Wallenstein does and do them well. Those, ladies and gentlemen, are my top 10 games that start with the letter W. Woo, what does that mean? Next X? That will be interesting, right? Anyhow, this has been the AlphaBest series of games. I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. What are your favorite games that start with the letter W? Tell me in the comments.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool Stuff, in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.